morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Wednesday night photo show here with Dan's Camera City, our little semi-weekly meet and greet and chat about photography session. I hope you guys have had a great summer. We've been kind of on hiatus with the photo show for a little while, and we're back. It's September, and we've got a new episode for you, and I have two guests with me tonight. First, we have Chris McGinnis over here. If you want to kind of introduce yourself.
Hey, yeah, sure. Chris McGinnis. I'm a macro photographer, focusing mostly on insects and spiders out in the field. I live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, so pretty close to Dan's in Allentown. I've been shooting macro for 5 or 6 years now, and excited to share some of my stuff with you and answer your questions tonight.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we also have a guest from the Wildlands Conservancy. Renee is here with us from the Wildlands Conservancy. And if you're not familiar with the Wildlands Conservancy, we'll give you a little intro to what they're all about. Dan's has partnered with the Wildlands Conservancy for a couple of things. We do our birds of prey outing with them, the photo workshops that we've done. We've done a couple of, we did a macro aquatic invertebrates workshop. And the Wildlands Conservancy has been an amazing partner to work with. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do and where you're located?
Sure. My name is Renee, so I'm an educator at the Wildlands Conservancy. Our main preserve is located in Emmaus, PA. It's called Dorothy Ryder Pool Wildlife Sanctuary, and it sits about 80 acres of land. And it's a really cool place to go hiking and exploring. The Wildlands Conservancy, we are the Lehigh Valley's premier land trust. So we buy pieces of land and work with other organizations to protect it and preserve it, and even restore it back to the way it should be, so that way the plants and animals have a place where they can thrive, where they're not going to be, developed on or built on. And we own, I think, 12 different preserves throughout the entire Lehigh River watershed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so not only down in the valley, we own things all the way up through the Poconos. So that's pretty great. And we've worked with different organizations and, the Game Commission and Fish and Boat and stuff. And we've helped to protect over 50,000 acres of land throughout the entire watershed. So that's kind of our main goal, is to protect and preserve land. But I work in the education department, so my job is to teach people about wildlands and what we do, and teach people about nature, so that way they have a better appreciation for nature and, want to go out and explore it.
That's very cool. I knew Wildlands was big. I didn't realize it was that big. That's enormous.
We hit that number, I think, we hit that number a couple of years ago, and we were very excited to hit 50,000 acres of land. And I mean,
awesome.
It's not all the land we own, but it's just land that we've helped to protect.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. All right. So while you're here I guess the reason we've got you here from the Wildlands Conservancy is to talk about some of this land that you've got. Our subject tonight is insect macro photography. And I guess tell us a little bit about some of the different habitats that you've got and some of the different programs that you got going on. And I believe you can introduce us to some critters tonight as well.
Yeah. So Wildlands, we offer a wide variety of different habitats to go and explore. All of our preserves are open to the public, free of charge, dawn to dusk. So at Dorothy Ryder Pool Wildlife Sanctuary, you can find a streamside, a floodplain trail, which offers a lot of really cool insects that you might not find elsewhere, because it's in a floodplain, and there's not a lot of floodplains left because a lot of them are being developed and built on. We also offer a couple of different wildflower meadows, where we have a lot of native wildflowers and other things to promote pollinators, such as bees and butterflies and ants and wasps. And then we also offer just our upland forest. So we offer a lot of upland forest, which a lot of people don't realize, but a lot of insects and other animals like to live deep in the forest, as opposed to out in the open. And that's just at Dorothy Ryder Pool Wildlife Sanctuary. Some of our other preserves, we offer a different habitat. Up at Thomas Darling Preserve, we are working on a huge project for golden winged warblers. So that is all open, shrubby type habitat with a few tall trees in the middle. And there's also a dense hemlock forest, or a spruce forest up there as well, that we're kind of keeping for flying squirrels. So we do a lot of different types of, we do a lot of different types of, work on all of our preserves to manage different types of animals and habitats. And I did bring some cool critters to show you guys. So these are some animals that if you're out trying to do some macro photography, these are things you might encounter while you're out there. So the first one, I will get out some butterflies because they're kind of showy and pretty. So this one here is our monarch butterfly. So these guys here are really cool because these guys here, they go through a couple different generations in the valley, and then the very last generation, so this one in particular, these guys are actually going to start migrating soon. So if you can see, I have a little sticker on his wing there, and that is a monarch tagging device. It's just a little sticker that we put on there, and then these guys will migrate all the way to Mexico. And once they reach Mexico, eventually they'll die and they land on all these trees and then they'll fall to the ground and die. And scientists down there will go and collect all of the dead monarchs and they'll look at the tags. And they can, enter in the numbers on the little tag and figure out where exactly that monarch came from.
Like where they came from. That's amazing. I mean, I hear the stories about, okay, they migrate to Mexico, but to think that a little insect that big makes that kind of a flight is...
Yep, they have to go all the way down to, and they have to cross the Gulf of Mexico. So the very last generation that breeds up here, they're bred to have really big, strong wings, so that way they can make that trip all the way to Mexico, which is, pretty remarkable when you think about the little tiny butterfly that flies all that way. And then I have another one that's kind of close to the monarch. So I have this guy right here. So this is called a viceroy. And the main difference between them and the monarch is if you look, the black line, it kind of makes a big black curve right there on that bottom wing there.
Okay, so it's...
Yeah, and they're a little bit smaller than the monarch, but they look almost identical.
And I assume that's like a biomimicry thing so that predators will avoid them?
Yeah, because monarchs are poisonous to eat. So if you eat them, you can get sick because they're caterpillars. They only eat milkweed. So that's like a big thing if you want to attract butterflies and other cool insects to your yard is you want to plant native plants. You don't just want to plant any showy flower that you find at any plant nursery. You want to plant native things that are found in Pennsylvania because those are what the butterflies and bees are really looking for.
Right, so that'll bring in your butterflies and your pollinators.
Exactly. So I usually recommend swamp milkweed. That's like the best milkweed to plant for monarchs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that you can plant the common one and the caterpillars will eat that and the butterflies will drink the nectar from the flowers, but swamp milkweed is a little better and I think it looks a little prettier too. So
that's their preferred thing, right?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
And then I have another one that actually it only eats as a caterpillar, which is kind of interesting. Let's see if I can get him off his leaf there. He doesn't want to come off the leaf. So this here is a Luna moth caterpillar.
Oh, wow.
So these guys here, they eat as a caterpillar. They'll eat walnut, and that's what he's on right now. And they'll eat birch, and they'll eat a couple other trees as a caterpillar. They don't eat any flowers or bushes. And then as an adult, these guys will, once they reach their final stage, which this one, he's in his final stage, or what we call the L5, he'll crawl down to the ground and he'll pupate in the leaf litter. And then once he closes as a Luna moth, they actually don't eat at all. They only live about a week or two, and they just breed. The female will lay her eggs and then they die. But these guys are really cool. And like I said, they eat birch or walnut, which walnut's pretty common. Or gum, they'll eat gum as well. That's usually their preferred one, but this guy's on walnut.
I know Luna moths are local, but I don't see them real often. If I wanted to find some, where would I look?
The moths, usually if you leave a light on outside, moths are attracted to lights at nighttime. So if you leave a light on your porch, a lot of times moths will come into your porch, and in the morning, usually if you check first thing in the morning, you can find a lot of cool moths like hanging out on your light or around your light. But like I said, the Luna moths, they like forests. They like walnuts, gum, and it's typically not like a lot of trees that you find, planted in a neighborhood. So they're going to be in the forest. I've only ever seen like a few moths in my life, other than the ones that are raised. But in the wild, I've only ever seen a couple of the actual moths. But usually if you go out at night, you can find the caterpillars. You can use a black light or a UV light and shine it in the trees. And the Luna moth caterpillars, they fluoresce. They brighten up a lot with the UV light.
Okay.
That'll
help you spot them.
Yeah, it's really easy to spot them when they're in the tree. And they look like big sausages. They get like this big, and they're a big sausage, big fat caterpillar. And I do have another caterpillar. This guy is a little bit smaller, so I'll see if I can show him to you really well. Be careful not to touch him, though. Okay. So this one right here. He's a little green, kind of spiky guy. This is called an Io caterpillar, and they turn into a really, really pretty little moth. It's kind of like an orange, kind of cream-colored moth, and they have these big eye spots on their lower wings. Which a lot of the pretty moths, they have these big eye spots, and that's just a predator deterrent because it's supposed to look like eyes.
Right.
And a lot of predators won't, attack that if it looks like the animal's looking at you because they want to get from the backside.
Cool.
And I have another one. This isn't a live one, but this is one that you guys have probably all heard about this year. I have a bunch of the brood-X cicadas. So these guys right here. These ones here are the periodical cicadas. They only come out every 17 years, and this just happened to be the year for them. And what's nice about cicadas is, like, again, they only live for so long, and then they die. Mm-hmm. So most of these ones were collected after they were dead, and then they, we put little pins in them and
fan them out, right?
Yeah, fan them out so they look nice because, like, they only come out every 17 years, so you have to have a couple specimens to show people.
Right.
But they're all done now. So right now you're hearing the dog day cicadas, which are the big green ones. Those are the ones you're hearing outside right now.
Neat. And you sent me a couple of pictures here, so let's throw those up, and you can show me kind of what it is that we're looking at here. Okay. You got a couple of neat ones.
So this is a monarch caterpillar. So I only showed you this one because the caterpillars are pretty much done for the year, so it's really hard to find any caterpillars, and I don't have any caterpillars right now. All I have are chrysalises and the butterflies. And I almost had a chrysalis to show you guys, but he decided to close before the program, so I didn't have a chrysalis. So yeah, that's a monarch butterfly, and he's on milkweed.
Now, if we were looking for these guys, you're looking at the milkweed, right? So I believe you guys have a big patch of, like, a big open meadow full of milkweed where you can find a bunch of these guys, right?
Yep, right behind the Environmental Education Center. There is a huge wildflower meadow, and it's covered in wingstem, milkweed, goldenrod, and there's a bunch of other native plants that you can find, or native flowers that you can find in that meadow. And it hosts, the monarchs, which is a huge year for them, and that's part of our monarch tagging program that we do. Our last program is coming up, but it's full already, so you can always be on the lookout for. What?
How does that work? What is it, when you say monarch tagging program? What kind of a program are we talking about?
So it's kind of a citizen science-based program. So one of our volunteers, she goes out and she collects the caterpillars and she rears them to butterflies. And then, like I showed you, the little butterfly with the sticker on it, we offer these programs so people can learn how to put the sticker on them. And you can buy these stickers yourself from, I think it's the University of, I forget what university it is. It's Kansas or Kentucky, but it's like $15 for a pack of the tags. And you just record everything down, and you put a sticker on the wing, and it goes on the little mitten on the wing, and they have, like, nice little diagrams to show you where it goes. And then you just submit all your information online, and then you let the monarch go, and then you're part of a citizen science program. So a lot of what Wildlands does is we try to get people more involved with, some of the kind of more sciencey things that we do. Like we do the monarch tagging, we do bird banding once a month where we catch birds and we put, little bracelets on their legs and we release the birds. So we do a bunch of different citizen science type programs.
That's awesome. So, like, what do we do? Like, you sign up for this program, and then, like, you're issued a butterfly net and go out there and catch some butterflies? No,
she usually has all the butterflies, like, caught already. You can try to go catch butterflies. It is incredibly hard to catch a butterfly during the day because they don't typically hold still. They're very active. And I know a lot of people, like, if you want to catch wild butterflies for the monarch tagging, what you can do is you can put out, like, a little hummingbird feeder with nectar on it. And you could just have
Oh.
like a little like cage with a rope,
Yeah.
and when the butterflies come on it, you just lower the cage on top of it, and then you can collect the monarchs that way.
Cool. So that's how you could get some models for your photography.
Yeah.
So what's this guy?
That's a polyphemus. So that one was the one that I wanted to show you guys because mine was like big and fat like that. So that's a polyphemus moth. They also turn into one of the really big showy moths with the big eye spots. And they're really cool caterpillars, and they're really fun. And they turn into these like big chunky eating machines. That's all they do. So yeah, it's a polyphemus moth, and that's the Luna moth not being very productive or not being very cooperative for pictures, as you can see. The good thing about caterpillars is they're relatively easy to photograph because most of the time they just sit there and they don't move.
They sit and they eat.
Yep, as long as you have a leaf, they're fine. So that is the wing of a polyphemus moth. So that's kind of the eye spots on their bottom wings there. And they're kind of like that really nice creamy with a little bit of orange or red in them.
It's a great close-up. You can see all the little structure going on in here.
Their wings are covered in like little tiny scales that are like super easy to rub off. So you have to be like kind of super careful when you're holding a butterfly by the wings, because if you hold them too tight or you rub your fingers together too much, you can rub off a lot of those scales.
And I assume that's part of what you do, like when you're explaining how to tag, you're going to learn how to hold a butterfly so that you don't hurt it.
Yep.
Right. Neat. Cool. Well, if you're just joining us, keep in mind that we will answer questions live. If you have questions for Renee, or if you have questions for Chris as we're going through stuff, please feel free to throw them in the chat, throw them in the comments, and we can throw them up on screen and we can get answers. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us from the Wildlands Conservancy. And this is all this stuff you can find right there. Like we talked about, like 50,000 acres, but you've got a tremendous variety of stuff going on right there at your main preserve, right?
Yep. There's a lot going on there. There's walnut is all over there, and walnut, like I said, the Luna moths like walnut. So if you just walk around, take a look at the leaves. If you're out during the day, you can look for leaves that are chewed on. So you don't want to look for leaves that have, I can show you one. So leaves like this, where the holes are in the middle, that is beetle damage. So that's not going to have a caterpillar. But if the leaf is chewed from the outside in, that's usually a caterpillar damage. And if there's a lot of leaves chewed like that, that usually means it's a big caterpillar.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're literally looks like it's got a bite taken out of it.
Yeah, yep.
Hey, good tip for trying to hunt down some bugs. All right, so now let's talk about some photography stuff. Chris, you sent me a ton of pictures. So I'm just going to throw some up here and we can take a look at some of what you've got going on here.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. So first up there, we've got a close-up of a wolf spider. So a lot of what I like to show with my photography is kind of bringing people into the world of the insects, these kind of face-to-face shots. Vantage points where people aren't really used to seeing them. Question that I get very often is, oh my God, where did you find that? Or where do you find all these bugs? And I do go out searching, of course. I go to places like Renee was mentioning. I'll go out to wildflower meadows and things like that. But quite honestly, a lot of my subjects are right in my own yard, right outside my office at work. They're all around us. You just have to look, and if you get lucky enough where something's cooperative, you can get shots like this. So this was in my backyard. I was just telling Scott and Renee before we went on air, I actually put my life at risk taking this photo unknowingly. This was taken in the dark a couple months ago outside my house, probably about 9:30 at night, and I was laying on my belly in the backyard trying to get face-to-face with this spider and get her to cooperate. And a deer ran out of the woods behind my house and almost trampled me while I was laying in the yard.
So, we've got a question.
Yeah.
Oh, I neglected that. Renee, why don't you tell us the address to get to the Wildlands Conservancy?
Sure. The address is 3701 Orchid Place in Emmaus.
3701 Orchid Place in Emmaus. And it's a neat place. If you haven't been there, you got to check it out. Oh, technical questions. So would that be one picture or is that a stack? And we can get into that a little bit, but
yeah,
how's
I
that
will.
work
So
out?
I mean, a perfect time to really explain what is kind of meant by that question. So with macro photography, pretty common terms are focus bracketing and focus stacking. To answer your question, this is a single frame shot, but I will show plenty of stacks here in a couple minutes. But what that means is when you're focus bracketing means varying. So you're varying your focus points through a series of photos to have a collection of photos with different focus points. And you do that because with macro photography and getting really close to your subject, you actually limit your depth of field tremendously.
Right.
So if you're not familiar with macro photography, maybe you're coming from landscape or portraiture or something else. This shot is at f10. And you can see that only the front plane of that spider's face is in focus. If you shot a portrait at f10, you might expect, the whole person and some of the background to be in focus. But as you get close to your subject, that depth of field really decreases. So oftentimes you'll bracket your focus. You'll shoot 5 or 10 or 100 frames at varied focus points through a bracketed series, and then you'll stack them in post. You can even stack them in camera. My camera allows me to stack in the camera also. So you can do it that way. You can stack with software like Photoshop or Helican Focus or Zareen Stacker. And these applications are intended to take your bracketed series and blend the in-focus areas of all of those points back into space. So you would start, say, on, if you were focus bracketing me, you would start on my nose, go back to my ear, and then blend all of those or stack all of those photos together to get the in-focus bits, but leave the out-of-focus bits. So, but I'll show some good examples of that in just a minute.
Yeah. So I guess I got to ask, like, you're face-to-face with a little spider that's all eyeballs looking at you there and big fangy things. So maybe for some of the people who are a little creeped out by spiders, what kind of motivated you to get into insect photography to begin with?
Yeah, great question. It was not my initial intention, right? So I got a macro lens because I thought macro photography was really cool. It wasn't just the insects and the spiders. It was really anything super close up. So I didn't buy the lens saying, oh, I'm going to be a spider guy or insect guy. But quite honestly, the inanimate stuff was kind of boring to me to shoot it, right? So like if you're into photographing flowers or inanimates and that's what you like to post, I'm probably going to like your photo when I see it on social media. It's not that I don't like it. I just didn't like to shoot it because there wasn't much of a challenge to me. I really started to enjoy that interaction with the live subject, and the hunt for the subject. So finding the spider, getting down to that spider's level, getting that moment of, I have a split second to capture this photo before it runs off out of sight again. And that sense of accomplishment of capturing those photos, that's what's really started to appeal to me. So now, single frame shot.
It's like wildlife photography, just much, much smaller.
It absolutely is, yeah. And there's people that photograph insects and spiders in a studio environment as well. That's fine. But for me, it's really about hunting for the subject, finding it, and then that kind of relationship that you have for that brief moment where you're trying to get their cooperation or patience and or get yourself into position because they're in some really horrible place, but you can see a photo in your mind. And then if you get them really cooperative, then you can go for that focus stack that we were talking about, which requires basically dead steadiness on both the subject's part and on your part, because you're taking a series of photos. So in order to align them later, you have to be really steady.
Right, like they've all got to line up with each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Perfect segue. This is a photo of thistle weevil on top of some thistle, and you actually see the flower of the thistle out of focus in the background. That's like that pinkish color. Patricia has a question there. Any tricks to get these little guys to stay still? Yes and no. No, because they're really, they have minds of their own and they're going to do their thing. But approaching slowly is really critical, especially with fly species. They're going to be looking for movement. So the slower you go, the better chance you have at getting close. I like to photograph as I move in. So, of course, I want that extreme close-up, that 1-to-1 or greater than 1-to-1 magnification. But a lot of times, depending on the subject, I would rather get something than get that perfect shot, right? So, and that's just like with large game wildlife. As you approach, you take your shot, you get a shot, move a little closer, take another shot, and continue in. And then if you're lucky enough to get really close, then you can kind of work your angles. But the other thing, probably the best tip, is to go out early in the morning. So insects and spiders, many of them are active during the high point of the day when it's the warmest, and they're inactive or just waking up in the morning. And then the morning dew not only slows them down as they're trying to dry off their wings or wait for the sun to dry them, but also gives you a pretty cool extra element to your photographs.
All right, where you get little dewdrops
little
on
droplets all over them. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this photo, before we move on, this is a stack.
This one is a stack. Okay.
This is a stack. This was 7 shots, and I stacked this with heel and focus.
So I've done a little bit of bug photography, and how in the heck are you managing to stack photos with a subject that's moving?
Yeah, so it's hard. They really do need to stay still, but only for a second. Shooting 7 shots literally takes less than a second or maybe 2 seconds. So it's very fast. But again, early in the morning is your best bet.
Gotcha.
Sometimes you just find a patient subject, or like Renee mentioned, a caterpillar is just going to sit there and chew on the leaf. Like, you kind of pick your shots. So
Gotcha.
Usually I'll approach and I'll be thinking single frame at first. If that goes well and I feel like I have an opportunity to shoot something for a bracketed series that I can stack later, I have a function button on my camera that's mapped to toggle bracketing on and off. And then I hit that button and then I go on to bracketed series.
That's a real good tip, like just assign a button so that you can switch back and forth super quick.
Yeah, and actually this is a tip for whatever type of photography you're into. For me, it's obviously macro, but if your camera, I shoot with the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II. If your camera has custom modes that you can set, so on my mode dial here, I don't know if we can see it on camera, but on top,
Here, I'll zoom in
I
on
have C1, C2, C3. Oh, sorry, here we go again. That side right there.
That one. There we go. Yeah.
Yep. So C1, C2, C3, I can customize those sets to have whatever settings I want. So C1 on my mode dial is my baseline macro settings. And over time, I honed those settings. I figured out what worked. I have certain functions that I want quick access to, like bracketing. I map that to buttons. And then when I go out in the field, I just turn my dial to C1 that's set up like I like it. And all my buttons are doing the things that I want them to do. And I'm pretty close to what I need to do for kind of any scene. And of course, I'll make adjustments. It behaves like it would in manual, but I'm close. And I don't have to reset those things every time.
Right, so that you're not changing 14 different menu settings every time you go out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here's another scene where this kind of goes back to both your question and one of the questions that came up on screen. If an insect or a spider is eating, it will probably stay pretty still for you, right? Like it is not as concerned with you as it is with its lunch. So This is a robber fly snacking on a green bottle fly. And this was right in front of my house, right on the sidewalk, on a street sign at the corner in front of my house. So that texture that you see where the fly's feet are, that's a metal, like a silver street sign. And this was vertical, so I was shooting down. And it pretty much stayed still for several minutes. And once I realized that it was going to stay still, I think this is, let me check the info here. So this was shot at f8, 50th of a second, and this is 14 shots that I stacked in Helicon focus.
Oh, wow. Okay. So he was really sitting still for a while.
Yeah. And when you shoot a bracketed series, you can do it a couple of different ways. If anyone's not familiar with it, my camera allows me to automatically bracket, which is really awesome. I just press the shutter button one time, and I can preset what's called a focus differential. So that's how much space.
Right, like how big of a step you're going to make.
Yep, how big the gaps are between focus. And I press that button one time, and it takes as many photos as I've set at whatever differential I've set. So that's how I did this. But sometimes I won't be really thinking about bracketing or have my camera set to bracket. But if you scroll down, actually, Scott, there's a photo with a green background. That one right there, the long-legged fly. So this is a stack of 3 shots, but I did this what would be considered manually, right? My camera wasn't set to bracket.
Okay.
So I was just shooting in like a low speed drive mode. So maybe probably 5 frames a second I had it set to. So fairly slow drive mode, but I do that so my flash has enough time to recycle. And I was just slowly pushing in on my subject. So it was manually focused toward the front of the subject. I pressed the button so it's, snap, 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 snap. And as it's firing those shots, I'm gently getting closer, and my focus point is moving back from the face of the fly toward the back of the head.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do, but there's really, the only risk is the stack doesn't work. As long as your first shot is in focus at the front plane, you're at least going to get that frame. And if it goes well, you get those other frames that you can stack later. And that's what happened here. Another tip.
I imagine that takes some practice. You're going to work at that a little bit before you get that motion right down.
Yep. And if you're going to take that approach, I recommend if you can kind of rest one hand under the camera and almost like rock on your hand or just slide on your hand a little bit.
Okay.
You're kind of like creating a makeshift tripod with your free hand.
Actually, that ties into another question that we've got. Do you use a tripod or are these handheld?
Yeah, so every shot that you see here is handheld. In fact, I don't think I've ever taken my tripod into the field. I'll use a tripod for real estate photography or certain things that just make sense for me to have a tripod, but I don't like to be weighed down by the tripod. I don't feel that it's necessary. My camera has really nice image stabilization.
Yes.
And all these are handheld shots.
Yeah, that's a distinct advantage of those Olympus cameras with their image stabilization is nuts.
Yeah,
amazing what you can do with them.
If anyone has questions specifically about any shot, feel free to ask if I don't mention it. But it surprises people sometimes that a lot of my photos are shot at like a 50th of a second or 100th of a second. And those are not speeds that people usually associate with freezing motion. But when
especially at macro distances.
Exactly, where every movement is kind of amplified. But when you combine the image stabilization with the flash, flash really allows you to shoot at much slower shutter speeds because that flash acts as a curtain essentially. So you are able to freeze motion at a much slower shutter speed. So if you're into macro and you haven't tried shooting with a flash, highly recommend it. So here I have Godox Flashpoint flash on my camera. So this is the TT350O because I have Olympus. The O is for Olympus. And
so
then
that's that's the little one with 2 AA batteries, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's just 2 AA batteries. I bring extras out into the field with me. Really easy to use. And then this big contraption here. This is a diffuser. So this is made by a friend of mine who lives in Australia. Great macro shooter. Cygnus Tech is his handle, and he makes these diffusers and sells them right from his Instagram. So he made this and sent it up from Australia, but it does a great job. And then what the diffuser does is it softens your light and spreads your light to eliminate those harsh shadows and highlights. So if you see sometimes, especially like dragonfly photos that are shot in the sun, they'll have a really bright white spot on their eye.
Right, that big specular highlight. Yeah.
Exactly. And you would see that same kind of thing with a shot like this if I wasn't using a diffuser, because that flash is very close to the subject. It's going to hit those compound eyes. Beetles especially are very reflective. You're going to get those hot spots, and you need a nice diffuser to soften that.
And you don't need like that specific diffuser, right? I've seen any number of weird diffusion
absolutely
systems that people kind of MacGyver together themselves.
Yep, you can make something yourself. I've made a couple and used them with pretty good success. I mean, this is technically homemade by Brendan, and
right. I mean, it's homemade. It's homemade by a guy
it's
in
homemade.
Australia.
It's sold to me. Or you can buy really inexpensive solutions that do work fairly well. From places like Dance, right? Like there's these little Velcro diffusers that just go on top of your flash, and they do the job.
Yeah. I picked up one of those just a little tiny Velcros on softbox. I mean,
it's a softbox, exactly.
So it's a softboxy thing. This big does not give you a lot of diffusion if you're doing portraits, but if you've got it on top of a bug that's this big, it's huge.
Oh yeah. It's like using a giant octabox, right?
Yeah. Cool.
So
hey, there's our monarch.
So there's a monarch. I think it's a monarch, unless it's a viceroy and I'm wrong. But
Renee, you want to weigh in on that?
It's a monarch.
Okay, it's a monarch.
All right.
So this is actually shot, I think, with the 60 macro as well. Yeah. So all the photos that Scott's showing tonight, these are all shot with the Olympus M Zuiko f2.8 macro. Really small lens. That's the one I have on my camera here, which kind of adds to why I can shoot handheld as well. I mentioned the image stabilization, but it's really light, right? So my setup is very small. I can shoot with one hand. I have that free hand to kind of move branches around and or stabilize my camera. So it's really nice to be kind of free in the field like that.
So I got to ask, like, I've tried photographing butterflies and I can't get close to them for nothing. They take off instantly.
Yeah, this one's
all over the place.
I would say about a foot away here, which is pretty close. Butterflies definitely like to fly away. But if you have that, there's another shot. I think I shared with you that's much closer. It's not a monarch. It's a flitterary.
This guy?
Yeah. So this is early in the morning.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So this is really close. I mean, this is 1:1 magnification, which is kind of the max magnification for my lens, or equivalent of 2:1 if you're comparing to a full frame system.
Oh, right. Yeah.
For anybody that doesn't understand what that means, or they're not, I don't mean to just kind of throw these terms out, but 1:1 magnification is kind of the standard in the macro world. And that means that my subject will appear the same size in real life as it does on the sensor, right? So if my subject was 18 millimeters long, my sensor is 18 millimeters. So that subject would fill the entire sensor. So it's a 1:1 relationship.
Right.
Now, the full frame sensor, if you're shooting with a different system, is twice the size. So basically, your subject would only be half filling the sensor for the same subject, or twice the output. So it's a 2:1 relationship in that sense.
And that 1:1 magnification on this guy, it's so cool the way you can see all the scales that Renee was talking about on the wings. You can see every one of them on there.
Only able to get this shot because this butterfly was a little chilly, a little bit wet, not really ready to fly yet. I found it kind of hanging out in the grass and just crawled right up next to it. And you still have to be really patient, still have to move slow, but they will stay pretty still for you early in the morning.
How early in the morning are we talking about? Like,
Usually just after the sun comes up. The first
okay, so
hour,
like right around sunrise.
the first hour or two after the sun breaks the horizon, I find to be the best. Once the sun gets higher in the sky, things start flying and makes your life a little bit harder.
Right. I like this guy.
Yeah,
I think
thanks.
you were telling me you kind of lucked into this one a little bit.
This was a little bit lucky. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to say, oh yeah, it's exactly what I was going for. But I was focused with this milkweed beetle on the milkweed, stationary. Just as I started to fire, it took off and spread its wings like this. So a little bit of serendipity there, but got a really cool shot of those wings spread. And that was shot for those that are watching now or tuning in later and you were local to the Lehigh Valley, in addition to Wildlands Conservancy, I live in Bethlehem, and Bethlehem has several dedicated pollinator zones. So those are areas that they just don't mow very often, and they're intended to encourage pollinators. So if anybody knows where the Memorial Pool is on Elks Mill Road in Bethlehem, right alongside, there's a huge field, lots of milkweed, lots of thistle, and lots of pollinators that you can go out and shoot. So really good place to go.
I love how this one looks like it's a posed studio portrait. Like you just, okay, now turn your head this way.
Yeah, mantises are incredibly curious creatures. Really cool. I think they look absolutely alien.
Oh, yeah.
They're very curious about you, which is really good for photographing them. They have that false pupil, which makes it look like he's kind of giving me that side eye, which is really cool. This was shot right in my backyard. I planted wildflowers, like Renee was mentioning, bring the subjects to you. It's very inexpensive. You're encouraging pollinators. Like you get flowers in your yard. Like there's a lot of benefits from a very inexpensive and easy thing. And this mantis was in my backyard. And this was shot in the middle of the day. So some people will see a shot like this and they'll think, oh, you're at night. Was this a flashlight? What? It's really just about exposing for your subject. And if that flash doesn't have anything behind the subject to hit, you're going to get a black background like this. So the shot there of the locust borer, it's kind of the top thumbnail in your side rail there. Same thing. So this is black background. So you can do that intentionally if you like that black background look. Sometimes I like it. Other times I want to show something in the background. So you just kind of need to know what you're dealing with and shoot accordingly.
So would you be then like you're just kind of dialing in your ambient exposure for whatever you want the background to look like and then filling in with the flash for
exactly. So
right?
Yeah, you got it. So this would be underexposing everything basically. So you're, if I was to shoot this with no flash, I would be getting a completely black frame. And then my flash is introduced to the equation and just illuminating the subject.
This is a great example of that morning dew that you were talking about too. All these little water droplets just add a kind of another layer onto this picture.
Yeah, they're really cool. I mean, they definitely add a lot of visual interest, and they're doing you that favor of kind of slowing your subject down. This is 3 shots that were shot the same way as I shot that long-legged fly. I did it manually.
So that handheld stack.
Yeah, just kind of gently moving forward toward the subject and firing along the way. And then right below that, we have everyone's favorite in Lehigh Valley. Yeah. So we've got public enemy number 1, the spotted lanternfly. Really a beautiful little creature, even though they're taking over the world.
Yeah.
But this is also my backyard on a zinnia, wildflower, just in a little flower box. And they're actually really challenging to photograph. Anyone that's tried to get close to a spotted lanternfly, whether it's to photograph it or to stomp on it, they pop off pretty quickly.
They jump and they just disappear. Yeah. So what was it like trying to get close to this guy to take a picture?
So if you are interested in photographing spotted lanternflies, my best tip is to don't expect to get a shot on the first try. You kind of got to chase them around, because their first hop will be like they run out of energy, it seems. So I don't know if they run out of energy or they just get used to you, but they'll jump quickly the first time and then a little slower the next time.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Like they need a little time to recharge after a couple of jumps.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And this is an example of, like, now you've brought the ambient exposure up a little bit to show a little bit of background rather than just being black.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so we'll put on a little Barry White.
Yep. I'm sure Renee has seen plenty of this out in the meadows herself. People are always a little taken back and say, "Oh my God, how did you find that?" This is a very common scene. I see a lot of this. You see a lot of it with ladybugs. You see a lot of it with Japanese beetles, with milkweed beetles, ladybugs, or these are Asian lady beetles actually. They, I guess, are engaged in this behavior, to explain it, for a long time. This could go on for 30, 40 minutes at a time. So it's not uncommon to kind of catch them in the act. But it is hard to get both the male and the female in focus at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, you've got their eyes on both of them are in nice sharp focus.
Yeah, and this one is a single shot. It's at f8.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Again, I'm shooting with micro four thirds with the Olympus system. So I'm getting a little more depth of field, which is actually a benefit with macro. So some people might argue the opposite. They would say, well, micro four thirds doesn't give me that depth of field that I like with full frame. But if you understand how to manage it, or if you're shooting macro, it's actually a benefit, right?
Sure.
So here I get a little bit more depth of field. I'm shooting at f8. So, you'd be up into the f11, f13 equivalent, or maybe even more on full frame. But I was able to shoot at a slightly higher angle shooting down to get those eyes almost in the same plane.
So you're rotating yourself to get the focal plane to line up across both their faces.
Right. If I had been down lower, the female's eyes would have been in focus and the male's eyes would be completely out.
All out.
Don't want that. Another trick to maximize the in-focus areas with really any insect photography, but especially if they're mating, is to shoot in profile. So this was a little bit harder because I wanted this more frontal view. But in profile, then the focal plane is, it's the same for both the male and the female.
Gotcha. It's a little easier to manage.
Yep.
Yeah. So we got a question for Bob Ackerman. Do you ever have a bug jump straight towards the camera? I was shooting a mantis and it jumped straight at the camera and bounced off the lens.
Yes, Bob, I have. Yes, I've had it happen with mantis, and a lot with jumping spiders. So, in fact, almost every time. So, jumping spiders, if you go 2 shots down, there's bold jumper.
This little guy.
Audox jumping spider, which these are really common. This is a pretty big one, which is great when you find a larger jumping spider, because it's just that much easier to get all those beautiful details and colors. This is, again, in my backyard. This was a single shot. But these Audox jumpers are really cool because they have that coloration. So they have like a blue or blue-green or green just above their fangs in the front. And then you get the eye color as well. So you get like a little blue to the eyes. And this is an example where I wanted that green in the background. So my exposure is slightly different. And I'm also looking for opportunities to catch something in the background, leaves or blades of grass that are going to bring that color in, rather than shooting into empty space where I'm going to get more of a black background.
Actually, so you're kind of lining yourself up. He's looking straight at you here. How much wiggle room do you have for trying to figure out what your background is going to look like?
It's a good question. Not much. This is kind of tucked into the grass, so there is a lot of grass above the subject. But you can also put something there. You can hold your free hand. You can grab a leaf and hold it behind the subject while you're shooting in front, and then you can pick up those colors. You can even bring construction paper out into the field. You can pick a flower and have that flower in your free hand to bring color in. So a lot of pretty easy ways to bring color into the background.
Mhm.
And it's unidentifiable, right? As long as it's a few inches behind your subject, it's just bokeh.
Right. Right.
So this
Okay.
one,
So this has got to be a stack, right?
it's like a half a stack. I did a little bit of Photoshop work from one other frame to bring some details in.
Really?
Just in like the one eye of the lady beetle, but
Huh.
it's essentially single frame. But I did have a little help from a second frame. But I had seen that jumping spider, and pretty much anytime I see a jumping spider in the field, I'm going to try to photograph it. And it did not want anything to do with me. It was very tiny. So what I like in this shot is you have the lady beetle. We pretty much know how big they are, right? Like your
Mhm.
mind can reconcile the size of a ladybug. And the jumping spider is much smaller than the beetle. So tiny little jumping spider, really active, ran away. I said, okay, I'll give up on that. Oh, there's a lady beetle. I'll photograph that. So in the middle of a series of shots, in the background, I see something, and it's the spider kind of running toward me to see what's going on. And I was lucky enough to catch this shot with it right in the same
Okay.
focal plane.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So, like, you keep throwing out names of all these different insects. Is this like, as you photograph them, you started to learn more about the bugs, or?
No, I'm just trying to
Where'd that
impress
come
Renee.
Oh, okay.
Because I know that she knows it all. No, that's something that people ask me about a lot. They say, "How do you know so much about bugs?" I definitely didn't when I started. I definitely don't consider myself an expert now, especially when someone's a naturalist or entomologist and they really are a bug expert. But like you just said, I'll photograph something. I'll have no idea what it is. I'll research it. I have an app on my phone called iNaturalist. So
Okay.
that can identify plants and animals by pictures. It does a pretty good job. There's another one called Seek. It'll get you in the right neighborhood, but then I'll use actual books, field guides. I'll use Bug Guide. I think it's Iowa State University has this huge database online of photos and information.
Cool.
So you kind of pull these resources, and then I forget just as much as I remember. But as you see
Sure.
subjects over and over, you start to learn about them.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't want to interrupt Renee earlier, but what she was saying about the leaves, that's exactly how I'm finding subjects. Yeah, sure, I'm going out into the field and I'm just looking, but I'm also looking for clues. I'm looking for leaves that are maybe skeletonized, where you kind of get just the veins of a leaf and all the meaty leaf parts are gone. Or you're looking for those chunks out of the side of a leaf. And you start to learn what host plants are good for certain insects, or what hiding places spiders like. And then you just really increase your chances of finding the subjects that you're looking for.
So they kind of feed into each other. It sounds like you take the pictures, which makes you learn more about the bugs, and then when you learn more about the bugs, you're able to get better pictures.
Absolutely, yeah. So these next two are both hoverflies, kind of totally different compositions and distance from the subject. Hoverflies are really cool. I actually just posted one on Instagram and Facebook yesterday, I think, a profile that I shot in my backyard. This is kind of a top-down. I don't shoot a lot of top-down. This is maybe like a 3/4 top-down. And the reason I don't is because that's the way people are used to seeing insects, right? We look down. We're big. Your eyes are 5-6 feet off the ground. You look down and you see something from top down.
Mm-hmm.
But when you can bring a viewer into a world at a vantage point that they're not used to, then that brings more interest to the viewer. But this is kind of this 3/4 view, and it's pretty close up. So I think that there's some interest here. You get to see that shiny abdomen or the thorax rather, and then the abdomen in the distance kind of blending into the flower. But hoverflies, like their whole head is eyeball. Like it's this giant compound eye with all these facets. I think they're really cool.
So like impossible to sneak up on them is what you're saying.
Impossible to sneak up on them, and in the middle of the day, they're really, really active. But the next one was shot at Housenick Park, Johnston.
Okay, yeah.
Well, Johnston, where the mansion is in Bethlehem.
Uh-huh.
And this is a little different. This is not super close up. I mean, technically wouldn't be considered macro, a little lesser magnification, but using that pedal that's out of focus to create some interest in the background and kind of that really soft background with the really sharp foreground.
Right. This back here gives you this nice separation.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So who the heck is this one?
So that is horsefly. So
You want to
anyone
talk
that's
about all eyeballs.
Yeah, you want to talk about like fun facts about insects. Horsefly, male horseflies do not bite. They drink nectar. Female horseflies do bite. And the way that you can tell them apart when you look at them is male horseflies' eyes are cleaved together. So this is a male, where the next photo, different species, but that's a female horsefly. So she has that, big part that she's going to bite you with, and the eyes are slightly separated in the center. So this is a female, and that's a male above. And that male that's shot in broad daylight, probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's on a pane of glass. So it's on. We have a balcony where I work, and this was out on the balcony. It was on the glass, and I was shooting down onto the fly that was on the glass, and it looks like it's on a mirror in a studio.
It 100% looks like a studio shot.
Yep.
That's
I actually
really
was
cool.
accused of shooting studio photography by someone one time. They said, "Oh, great, studio macro," and I was like, "Well, this was shot outside. I don't know what to tell you." So that's a nice dewy grasshopper. This was also shot in Bethlehem, out in that same field I mentioned next to Memorial Pool.
Okay.
The dew totally, in my opinion, adds an element to this.
Yeah.
This was a stack of a few images, not a lot. 3 shots. I think I shot this in kind of that same method I explained before, where I was just using a low drive mode, taking shots. Sometimes I won't even do it intentionally. And what I mean is I'll often take 2 or 3 shots, not to intentionally bracket my focus, but just to give me a better chance at catching focus. And then if I get back home and I put those on my computer, I notice, okay, they're all slightly different focus. I can use all of them. And then I'll bring them into Photoshop or Helix and Focus. Yeah. So that's what I did with this. But grasshoppers, they basically have like battle armor for body.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, those big plates. And yeah.
So, and you can really see.
I know we've got, and this time of year, like get right out there at sunset, or not sunset, at sunrise.
Yeah.
When they got this dew on them. But I've noticed just walking around the photo park that we've got out back here at Dan's, I go out there for a walk at lunch, and they're all over the place. They're scattered out in front of me as I'm walking down the little path.
And for anyone that is interested in photographing grasshoppers, may be surprising, but you can find them by sound. So you walk out into the field, and if you're kind of walking slowly, you'll hear them, and just stop for a second, try to figure out what direction that sound's coming from, take a couple more steps.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Stay still for a few seconds. That sound gets louder. You're in the right direction. Take a few more steps, and you can zero in right where they are. And then, you have to hope that they're going to be patient enough to stay still, but you can find them.
Yeah. Neat.
We talked about that one already.
Yep.
And last but not least on the list is...
All right. So how the heck?
So I am not an in-flight expert. If anyone's interested in finding people that are in-flight experts, I follow a few people on social media that are absolutely in-flight experts, and I can refer you.
Got a question about the grasshoppers. When you're listening for them, what are you listening for?
Renee, can you give a good description of what they sound like? I feel like
Like I
Kind
feel
of
like I
a
mostly find crickets.
It's like a shrill kind of
like a
screeching almost.
yeah, it's like a I don't know. Every grasshopper is slightly different with their sound. It's hard to describe.
I wonder if one of those apps has like recordings of the bug noises.
Oh, they probably do.
Probably
Um,
someplace you can find them.
but if you're out in the field, forget what that grasshopper sounds like. If you hear any sound in the meadow,
Mhm.
walk toward it and see what it
Oh
is.
yeah, see
Maybe
what
it's
it
something
is.
interesting to photograph.
Yeah.
But yeah, this shot here.
So
So those are crocuses, the flowers. So we recently moved, but in our old house, we would get these crocuses on the front lawn in like March or April, early in the spring, and they only show up for maybe 2 weeks and then they all die off. But um, on a warm day early in the spring, the crocuses open up during the day and the bees are all over them, and you can see the pollen in the hairs of the bee there, back of the face and on the shoulders.
yeah,
And I said, all right, if I'm going to ever photograph insects in flight, like it's a pretty good opportunity. So I went out on the front lawn, I lay down on the ground, and of course, the bees don't want anything to do with me, so they all fly away. So now you're like crawling around, chasing them, trying to find them. But what I did here is I kind of set my focus on the inside of the flower, and I just watched the bees. And they kind of have a habit; they'll go from A to B to C to D, and you kind of watch them fly around and try to predict where they're going to go next. And as I saw this one coming in, I was firing off frames, and sure enough, caught this one right where I wanted it, just as it touched down on top of the flower.
Okay, so this is really about patience, just knowing eventually a bee is going to come to this flower, just sit there focused, ready to go, and just wait for him to show up.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is a little faster shutter speed. This is 1/250th of a second at f6.3. I did use a flash, though, really just to fill. This was kind of exposed for the whole scene. But I missed a lot of shots, too. And, I think anyone that's listening, looking for tips, don't get discouraged. Take a lot of photos. We're in the age of digital photography. It's free, right? Like you don't have to worry about the cost of film. Don't be afraid to miss. But when it works, pay attention. So next time you're not going to miss as many, and you have a better chance. And on that same topic, practice indoors. Practice with inanimate subjects. In the wintertime, I'll still pull out my camera inside the house and I'll practice. I'll practice focusing. I'll practice, getting steady or different compositions and things. And you can take all of that with you into the field, because if you don't do that, I guarantee that you will find a subject that you're really excited about. You'll have a 2-second window of opportunity to photograph it. You will miss that opportunity and it will fly away. And
Right.
if you prepare yourself and you get those settings dialed in and you start to understand how to move, you're going to set yourself up for a much better chance at success.
That's a great tip. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. All right.
If there's any other questions, we can field them now.
Yeah, if there are any questions, you throw those in the chat and we will take a look at them. If not, you can, well, I want to let you kind of plug yourselves here. So where can they find you?
Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
You could find Wildlands at wildlandspa.org, and that has an entire list of all of our preserves and all of our programs that we're running. We are doing a few events in the next couple of months. Tomorrow we are, not us, but Apollo Grill in Bethlehem. They are hosting a fundraiser event for Wildlands, and 20% of the proceeds is going to be donated back to Wildlands. So if anybody wants to go out for dinner tomorrow, Apollo Grill is, hosting a big event for Wildlands. And we're going to have some, upcoming events as well in the near future. So you can find all those at wildlandspa.org.
Excellent. Yeah, and if you haven't been out there before, please go check out Wildlands Conservancy. Just the little bit that you walk across a little bridge and you go to the little education building, and there's the stream and the pond over here, and then there's the wildflower meadow, and there's the forest, and there's so much stuff just in that tiny little area to go take pictures. It's fantastic. Oh, we got one more camera question. What kind of settings do you normally start with?
So it's a bit of a loaded question, but I will do my best to answer it. So I will say that the settings that I start with, they are for, the Olympus system, micro four thirds. They may vary slightly if you're shooting with full frame or a different sensor, but I had a feeling this question was going to come up, so I have it all written down here and I can read it to you. So my kind of base settings, right? That C1 on my dial that I mentioned, my camera's behaving as it would in manual mode, and my shutter speed is at 1/160th. And again, these are starting points, right? This is just how the camera's set up, but not every shot's going to be the same. But shutter speed at 1/160th, aperture at f8. My ISO is 200, and that's because my camera's native ISO is 200. So if your camera's native ISO is 100, then I would say start at 100. Whatever that is, that's what you should be using, because you don't want to rely on your camera's interpolation, or you want to be able to control your raw file in the end. So shoot at the native ISO. I leave my white balance on auto. I turn face priority, face detection off, because I'm not shooting people.
Right.
I have manual focus set as the default, but I have a function button set to toggle manual and autofocus. So I usually use autofocus as I'm approaching a subject, and then once I get closer to my focal working distance that I want to be at, then I'll switch over to manual focus. And
yeah, that makes sense.
There. Yep. I mentioned that I have my dry mode set to sequential.
Oh, sorry.
Sequential low. Shooting in RAW, image stabilization's on auto. And then I use live view boost. If your camera has that, it's really helpful, because with such slow shutter speeds and a lot of times in darker environments, live view boost gives me a bright image on my LCD or in the viewfinder that is not representative of what my exposure will be, but I don't care. That's going to be determined by my settings.
So turn off that exposure preview and just show me what I'm looking at.
Show me my subject. Yep.
Yeah. How about that flash setup?
Yeah, so I don't know if it helps to see it, but so I'll turn it on here. So my flash is pretty simple the way that I use it anyway. So I have it in manual mode, and there it's at 8th power. But I can set it to 1/8, 1/4, 1/64th, full power, whatever. And if I need brighter, I give it more power. If I need darker, I give it less power. It's pretty straightforward up and down.
But you find for like at that f-stop and at those distances, an 1/8 is an okay starting point on that flash.
Yep.
Cool.
So hopefully that helps you, Kathleen. If anybody has specific questions about my settings or how I operate, my Olympus camera, I'm happy to answer them. And then I guess I can segue right into, if you do want to get in touch with me or follow me at all, I am Innis2Winnis on Instagram, or Chris McGinnis Macro on Facebook, and chrismcginnis.com. So on chrismcginnis.com, you can see a bunch of my photos, you can order prints, you can contact me, or you can read all about my gear. So everything that I shoot with, I kind of outline what it is, why I use it, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Awesome. Yeah, so definitely go follow Chris on Instagram and see all kinds of cool pictures of bugs. I shared a couple on Facebook this morning. He's got some great stuff. Go check out Wildlands Conservancy. They've got all kinds of events coming up, and it's just a great place. Support them if you can. They're great partners and great people, and what they do is really cool and really important. And thanks so much to both of you for joining us this evening. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. We will see you again soon. Until next time, good night and have a good one, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
Bye.
Bye.